Okay, kids, it is raining here in Mumbai because it's the monsoon, but as usual, the monsoon is not being as vigorous and as reliable as it can be. It rained last night and now it's dry, which means it's hot and humid in Mumbai, which means I am running a fan, which means there is a little hissing sound in the recording, and I'll make sure that it is not too loud and too noisy, and we'll just keep continuing to discuss now good things about climate solutions, driving on electricity. We already mentioned electric cars, hybrid cars, plug-in hybrids, all these things you may have already learned if you're old enough, or maybe your father or mother has electric scooter, electric car, or electric bicycle and so on. So not that long ago, all telephones were tied to a cord. You may have a phone in the house that is plugged into the wall with a wire. Do you have any idea how silly this looked when I was growing up? In fact, that's the only thing we had if we had a phone at all, because not everybody had a phone unless you were rich enough, and you couldn't just call anybody from anywhere. Sometimes if it was long distance or from another country, from one country to another country, then you had to call the local exchange office and tell them, I'm going to call in an hour, please go and tell my father I'm going to call, and so on and so forth. But in 20 years time, children will think cars with exhaust pipes look just as weird as landlines, and you are the kids who may think that, because cars that run on diesel and gasoline have had their day. Well, not quite, but they are still around, so you still see them, but let's hope they will be gone in a few days, few years, few decades. 2 decades from now, a car with an exhaust pipe will be just as old-fashioned as a telephone with a cord is now. Nearly all the experts agree. Electric cars are the future. The only question is whether they will be powered by batteries or fuel cells. Well, unfortunately, there is an additional question, because the batteries are charged with energy, and that energy has to be also clean, renewable, solar, wind, nuclear, waves, and so on. Fuel cells, do you know what they are? Well, they are things that do not burn anything or do not store energy. They directly take the fuel that's coming in and convert it to electricity. So you just give it hydrogen, and fuel cell converts it into electricity and the energy, and it can drive the car. Okay, the electric cars you see on the roads now are almost all powered by a battery. To charge the battery, you have to attach the car to a charger, just like you do with your phone or your computer and so on. Charging takes longer than refueling with gasoline, and a full battery won't take you as far as a full tank of gas. But an electric car doesn't have an exhaust pipe. Doesn't even have an exhaust pipe. Okay, so when you have been traveling with your parents, they just stop at a gas station or a petrol pump, as we say, and just open the hatch of the petrol tank and pour the gasoline, and it's done in a couple of minutes. But if you want to charge your car, that's gonna take hours, and if you're driving on a battery car, then your father may be anxious, your mother may be anxious, because it may only go 300 kilometers or so in one charge, and before you reach that, it may need to be recharged. While you may see petrol pumps everywhere, you may not see charging stations for car batteries everywhere. So people are still anxious about electric cars. So here we went from horse buggies to a car that looked nice and old but emitted lots of things, and then we moved to bigger and cozier and cars with air conditioning and so on, and we're still emitting, and we're still driving cars that are internal combustion engines that take petroleum or gasoline or some kind of a natural gas and fire into a cylinder, and there is a spark, and the cylinder turns and the axle turns and the wheels turn and so on. So there are no nasty substances coming out of an electric car because it doesn't even have an exhaust pipe, because it doesn't even emit anything, and of course no CO2. They are a lot more economical too. That's also true of electric cars with fuel cells instead of a battery, but if you ask your parents, they may tell you this is not always true. Sometimes you get a subsidy, a tax reduction from the government to buy an electric car, and the fact is there are not that many fuel cell cars. So the fossil fuel car may still be much cheaper, but you can see that the number of electric cars is increasing. More and more people are buying them, and more factories are producing them, and they are now able to run longer and longer with one battery charge. It was 200 kilometers now and became 300, and then it became 400, and so on and so forth. Okay, so those cars are usually fuel cell cars. So it's true of electric cars with a fuel cell instead of a battery as well. Those cars usually run on hydrogen, filling up with a hydrogen tank. Filling up with hydrogen is usually much faster than charging a battery, of course, because it's just like filling gas almost, and a full tank will take you a lot further than a battery in general. The major disadvantage is that hydrogen takes up a lot of space in your car and at the fuel station. Why? Because hydrogen has low density. Even if you compress it or liquefy it, per kilogram, how much energy does it give, let's say, compared to gasoline or natural gas? That's what you are talking about. So you have to carry lots of hydrogen to go far. Also, there is hardly anywhere that you can fill up with hydrogen yet, but that will soon change. Cross your fingers and wait for them. Battery or hydrogen with an electric car, there is no CO2 coming out of an exhaust pipe, but an electric car has to get its energy from somewhere. As I said, to charge a battery you need electricity, and you can't just scoop hydrogen out of steam. Steam is H2O, but H2 is bound to O, and you have to separate it out. It's the substance that combines oxygen to form water. Hydrogen is. To separate the hydrogen from the oxygen, electricity is again used, some form of energy used. That energy can come from a power station, but the power station is burning fossil fuels. Then it's not good for the environment. If that's the case, then the CO2 isn't coming out of an exhaust pipe, but instead it's coming out of a chimney at a power plant. So here is a nice bus and a little car, and they're coming together, and here is a plug-in hybrid that is not emitting anything like this, and here is another plug-in hybrid, and there is a hydrogen tank, and there is a bigger hydrogen tank. It tells you how you cannot even see the battery here, but you have to carry a lot of hydrogen, right? Excuse me when I talk like this. I feel thirsty and I start coughing. So an electric car is really clean only if it uses electricity from a clean source of energy, preferably a source that does not emit CO2 and does not run out. These are called sustainable energy sources, renewable energy sources. There are more and more of these coming along, not just to charge cars, but also to heat your house, to charge your tablet, and to run factories as well. In short, to do everything that coal, oil and natural gas always did. We may just be able to use sustainable or renewable energies, but which sustainable energy source is the most useful, you ask me? Which energy is the future? And that's your future. You are the future. So we'll come back and read about windmills and water power. How can we generate energy without greenhouse gas emissions? That's not difficult per se, but if you want to produce a lot of it, then you have to think about how to transmit it, where to produce it, how much it costs, and so on and so forth. Okay, so we'll come back and talk about some exciting new energy production methods that are not based on fossil fuel but can produce power without greenhouse gas emissions. Wouldn't that be lovely if we can produce all the energy we need without emitting anything, and then charge the batteries and run the cars on the battery without emitting anything, and charge your tablets, charge your phone, and charge your music systems, and so on and so forth. Okay, so we'll come back and discuss that. It's really fun, isn't it? Let's meet again.